Erik Korem. I feel like you were just interviewing me a little bit before this. So as a podcast host yourself, I'm sure you're used to asking the questions, and you have been on several podcasts, but you've been doing this for 4 years. You said hosting your own podcast, so yeah, that's why I'm
Yep.
laughing going into this.
Yeah, it's fun to answer stuff because most of the time I'm trying to tease out the gems, you know what I'm saying? So hopefully I have something to deliver to your audience today. Maybe it's just regurgitating some of the things that I've heard over the past 4 years.
Well, it's probably a lot of good stuff, so I'm looking forward to, even if it is regurgitation here. But so you've got an interesting story, man. You were a walk on at Texas A&M.
Yeah. So, grew up here in the state of Texas. Football's really big. And this is 1999. And had an opportunity to walk on at A&M, made the team. And, we had a tremendous amount of talent at that time. And so it didn't take very long for me to realize, like, okay, there's a difference between me and these guys. I think we had 9 guys get drafted off of that kind of class, which is kind of insane. A lot of those guys have won Super Bowls. And so, I was always looking for an edge, and I wanted to be a surgeon. I thought I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. But there was we had this amazing weight room called the Needham Steed Laboratory, and attached to the weight room was this physiology lab, and this is like pretty new stuff at the time. And so, I went to my strength coach one day, and I just said, "Hey, what is all this over here?" And he's like, "There's a science to training athletes," and I wanted to learn more about that. And so, because I was always bugging the strength coaches, like, "What can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do?" Right? And worked my butt off, got an opportunity to kind of travel with the team by my senior year and play a little bit. And when came time for me to graduate, my strength coach helped me get an internship, and I went to the University of Arkansas. And I was an intern there, and I earned a graduate assistant spot, which, if people don't know, that means you go to school full time and you also coach full time. And one day this coach walks in, and he's got several athletes with him. He's like, "Hey, would you like to work these athletes out?" And they were all coming off of kind of an Olympic run. So it was Veronica Campbell Brown, Omar Brown, who would soon be her husband. There was Tyson Gay. It was absolutely amazing. So I spent like almost 14 years specifically with Veronica, who ended up being an 8-time Olympic medalist. She won 3 gold medals in the short sprint events. And I got to travel the world and see how the rest of the world was training and developing athletes. And it really opened up my aperture for what we could do here in the States with athlete development, because nothing was going on here. Like, they had these systems, like in Australia, they have the Australian Institute of Sport. They didn't have anything like that in the States. They had the USOC, but it's kind of confined to, a couple locations, but it was not spread. This idea of bringing strength conditioning and sports science and nutrition. Sports science didn't even exist. And so that's what I wanted to do. And was very fortunate. Fast forward a number of years later, I ended up working at Florida State with Jimbo Fisher, who is the new head coach, who just taken over for Bobby Bowden. And he gave me the opportunity. He brought me in as the speed coach and had me running nutrition. And then eventually I ended up becoming the director of football operations, which is kind of crazy. But had the opportunity to go to Australia for a month. I got invited by an Australian rules football team. It was a startup franchise to help them with some specific issues they were facing. And a colleague of mine, Joe Danos, and I went over. Now he's the director of sports science at the Denver Broncos. And we got to see what high performance really was, what the role was, how sports science fit into this. And then we came back, and Coach Fisher gave us permission to start using athlete tracking technology to track our team, which nobody had done really in American football. So we created the first data model, like what is actually happening on the field. And then we were able to use that information to build better training programs, help our coaches better manage our players. We implemented some other pieces of technology to get kind of early warning detection systems for injuries. And we had about an 88% reduction in injury the next year, and our team won a championship. We were loaded with talent, but we were pretty injured the year before. And we flipped everything over And my career just kind of took off from there. And so ended up having an opportunity to run high performance at an SEC school, and then went to the NFL. And so, yeah, my career has been in that world. And along the way, I got a PhD in studying sleep and stress resilience.
Wow. All right. So thanks for the background, man. It's very, very interesting. You've had a interesting route to where you are at this point. If you were to define high performance, how would you do that?
Yeah. When I say I want to, if you want to have a high performing individual, right? Especially in the realm of sports or even in business, I always say, let's just take from sports perspective. I want to develop the most resilient and adaptable athletes that can consistently obtain their performance potential. You could replace athlete with executive, with mom, with dad, with teacher, whatever. Resilient and adaptable. Resilient meaning that you can take on physical and psychological stress and continue to move forward and really get back to baseline as quickly as possible. You want to have, like, the hallmark of a high performer is stable, consistent performance, where you don't have these huge fluctuations in performance. You're very stable and consistent, but you're consistently improving. So there's minimal perturbations from your baseline. And so that's what I consider a high performer.
Sure. So consistency. Yeah, that's been a recurring theme just from coaches, or whether it's people in business, it's consistency. And getting back to that baseline. Yeah. So stress, you talk about stress. I think you're a busy man. You're taking 40, 45 minutes of your day here out of your busy schedule. Like, how do you balance a schedule? That's something that I try to do, and I don't know if I do it well, but like when stress creeps in, how do you balance a busy schedule like that?
Yeah, I think the first thing to understand is, like, let's create a right relationship with stress to start with. And I know that you've heard me say this before, but, like, stress isn't the enemy, it's the gateway to growth. Stress is the only way that you get better at anything. You want to learn a new skill, you have to engage in the deliberate and stressful task of learning. You want to get stronger, you have to go lift heavier things. You want to get faster, it's all a stress on the human organism. The key is the right dose of stress and the right dose of rest. That helps you become more adaptable. You can then adapt to the stress. If you overstress the system and don't provide enough rest, guess what? You'll get injured, you'll get sick, and ultimately you die. Like, organ failure is overload of stress, and the body can't adapt and recover. Okay. And so, that's a very simplistic kind of way of looking at it, but it's how things work. These you can't go against the laws of nature on this one. So I think, like, I said resilient and adaptable. Adaptable is somebody that can take on stress and turn it into strength, right? And that strength could be, actual physical strength or psychological strength or a new skill or whatever. Now, in regards to how to manage a schedule, I try to leave as much blank space as possible and time box. Now, I'm my own boss right now, so I can do that and I can prioritize the most important things. But for me, I try to get as much as I can get done before 11 a.m. Like, just a flurry of tasks that I need to get done. Anything that requires deep thinking. So I'm up at 5:30 probably. I go on a walk. Look, I'm not one of these biohackers. I don't believe in hacks, but I do take a cold shower. And the only reason I do that is it just wakes me up. Right. And then if I had a cold plunge, I would get in it because it wakes me up. That's it. And then I spend some time in the Bible, and then I get to work. I mean, I'm like 7:30, I'm working. And then I try to get as much as I can get done before 11 o'clock, because then I eat lunch and then I have a few more hours of productive work, and then it's kind of done, right? Like, if you can get, and I try to time box, like, the next 60 minutes, I'm going to work on this one thing and I'm just going to get it done, right? Like, no distractions, no phone, just put my head down, get it done. If you can get two 1.5 hour work sprints with 0 distractions in the day, you are crushing it. If you can get 3, you're like on another level. So that's how I do it. I start my week by writing down the 3 biggest things I need to get done. And then I try to break it up during the week. And honestly, I try to get it all done by Wednesday. So I don't have the pressure going into the weekend of like, I'm still behind on this thing. Now there's some things that just take longer, right? But I'm like, I got to chop wood and get these things done. And then I just bang them out.
Yep. So it's focus. Yeah, because I guess that question that I asked you was basically was a way of me saying that when I don't do a good job of tackling tasks and like you get overwhelmed, that's when stress kind of comes into the equation. But one thing I think I've heard you say, whether it was in a podcast or an episode that you were on, was kind of what you were just explaining, like attention is the currency of performance, right?
Yeah. That's Dr. Peter Haberl.
Okay.
He's a psychologist, is a good friend of mine. And I want to make sure people know that that's him. But yes, attention is the currency of performance. Like every elite athlete, every executive, every great whatever wants to have control of their attention. And because for a number of reasons, like we're all going to get distracted. It's not if, but you will. But if you can notice that you're distracted, then you have an opportunity to correct course. Or if you notice like one area that I really struggle with, I would say it's a flaw, that's something I have to work on, is rumination. Is like sitting here and trying to, I think of a thought, it could be negative or it could be positive, whatever. And I'm just like trying to problem solve in my brain forever. And I'm like, that's not taking me anywhere. Because anxiety, what happens is you actually, by ruminating on things, you actually kind of have a dopaminergic response because you feel like you're solving a problem, but you're not solving anything. It's not strategic thinking. Mm-hmm. It's you're trying to control the situation. So like after this, sometime later today, I'll probably get in 10 to 12 minutes of mindfulness. That's another thing that really, really helps me is when I train mindfulness, I'm training attentional control and focus. It's a superpower, man, especially now in our distracted world with cell phones and all the things that can pull your attention away. Knowing you're distracted and redirecting yourself is a critical skill.
So I just heard that from somebody else too. I'm in a group. I don't know if you want to call it a men's group or whatever you would call it, but there was a guest speaker in there that basically said exactly what you just said, that that dopamine hit that you get when you think you're solving a problem, but you're actually not. It's interesting. Yeah. Cause that just builds up more problems essentially. Like you think, you're solving one and then it just snowballs. And
cause then you have a stress response. Heart rate goes up.
Yeah. Exactly.
Cortisol goes up. All the things start, and it starts spiraling. Does that make sense?
Yep. And especially the rumination. Cause as you said that, I'm like I have these notes here and I'm kind of thinking of, all right, between what he's talking about and the next question I want to ask, how can I balance the two of them? But in reality, the best question would probably just come from me listening to what you say and then take it from there. So yeah.
I know that dance in your brain. You don't want to cut somebody off to try to get to something, because usually the goal is when they finish the thought and keep going.
Exactly. Yeah. So that maybe I'll ask you about your podcast then, because you've done you've been working on it for 4 years.
Yeah. 568 episodes.
568 episodes. That is a lot of episodes
it is a lot
when it comes to podcasts. And that's like so talk about the consistency, right? Mm-hmm. What, why'd you start it? And then what's the reason that you're still going with it? Is it your curiosity or what is it?
Yeah. Like I started it because, I was curious. I wanted to just start, it was kind of that COVID time and you're reflecting on a lot of things. I'm like, I would love to have a show. Man, it's so funny. Like I didn't know about social media. I thought, man, I have an original idea here. I want to interview high performers that I know and put them on. And anyways, I laugh because I realize like now, like you're in a sea, right? And the fact that I've got 568 episodes and X amount of it's an outlier, but it took so long. And that's what most people won't tell you is like success is going to take you a whole lot longer than you think. But anywho, I was curious. I had some, my first thing is I started panicking. I brought like 7 people on the show and I'm like, oh my gosh, like who else am I going to ask? Like, I don't know, and like you start going down this list and then now I'm 568 episodes in and now my inbox is just full of people trying to get on the show. And now it's trying to filter out the weirdos, to be honest, that are just like trying to peddle products
like
or
me.
like, not you. I could tell you were very,
sort of normal. Yeah.
Very genuine. But, yeah. And now it's like, okay, what is it that I'm interested in learning? What's relevant to, the core of the show, cutting edge science, leadership, and life skills. And then I'm just going to go find people that want to talk about it that are really good at that thing. And so I've interviewed like Dr. Bapu Jena, who's like an economics professor at Harvard, to, Dana Perino, the Fox News correspondent, to Navy SEALs, to the former head of selection and development for special forces, it's insane now that I wish I could, if I could pay somebody, I may do this. I may have somebody find somebody offshore somewhere to download all of the episodes and then feed them into an instance for like Azure and then have a GPT so that I can just filter through all the notes. Like, how would so-and-so have answered this question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm sure.
I forget all the people that have been on the show, and that's sad. But it's like there's so much. I'll go back and like, oh my gosh, I really interviewed that person. I'll just go listen to him. Like, my goodness, that was such good stuff.
Yeah,
and it wasn't me. It was like, it's like anything, like sports, man. Like the only way a team is great is with great talent. It starts with talent. So like when the success of the podcast comes down to a host that listens more than they talk. Unless you're a Joe Rogan or somebody that people are there to hear their personality, people want you and your authentic you, and then finding ways to get people on the show and in pulling out the gems that are it gives people actionable, recommendations or something they walk away and go, I can use that. That made a difference in my life.
Oh, that definitely, man. Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it's been trying to cater, like, because I'm still relatively early on, but trying to figure out how I can cater that to a certain audience. I find that I'm going down different. I mean, I'd love to ask you at some point about hopefully something that can cater my audience in terms of former athletes and performance and whatnot. But I'm finding myself just curious about different things too.
Have you ever asked your audience?
No.
Do you know people that listen?
I do know. I do know a few of them.
Email them and just say, hey, what do you like? I would also say this, like, once you tell people who the show is for, then curate content for that. So like, my show, I say at the very beginning, this is what we're here to do. And here's what you're going to learn, and then people will self-select like, yes, this is for me. Just tell them right at the beginning. This is a show for busy moms that like to do CrossFit and eat keto. Immediately you're like, no, that's not for me. Or this is for dads that knit. I'm all in. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of like, you just tell them who it's for. And it's even better if this is one thing I wish I would have done, is just name the show what it is.
Yeah. What's yours? Yours the blueprint.
Is that
what
it's totally like just obscure. Like, what is the blueprint? Now knowing what I know, I would have named it something very specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you change it now? Well, I don't know.
It'd be a
rebrand. Yeah, reboot. Yeah. So, all right. So you've been doing, because it's interesting. You went for just like, it was University of Pacific, Mississippi State. Well, there's a few other stops before that too, right?
Yeah.
And then William and Mary was the last stop you had before you founded AIM7. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that's a pivot, right? You go from the performance world into almost I don't want to call it a tech startup, but
it is
sort of. Is that what you would call it? Okay. So
Human
what's
performance
the
tech startup?
Yeah. Okay. So what's this? What's the story there? Like, what made you start AIM7?
Man, I was at William and Mary, and really what happened is in 2019, I was selected as what's called a presidential leadership scholar. And it's the presidential scholars is it was founded by the two Bush institutes, the LBJ and Clinton Foundation. And so it's two Democrat, two Republican presidents, their foundations. And what they're trying to do is like equip really good people with the resources to make an impact on the world and in the United States of America. So I got training literally by the former administrations and the presidents themselves over about a 6-7 month period of time. They flew us to DC, to all the presidential centers. Like, I got to eat dinner next to the Declaration of Independence. They shut down the National Archives. It was just like mind-boggling stuff. And they flew in like ex-general or CEO of Boeing or whatever it was. We're at Georgetown University getting training on how to develop culture and what are core values. I mean, it almost is like a blur now that this actually happened. And it changed my life. Like, you've got former, like, forget what you think about any of these presidents. It's a president of the United States of America. And they're sitting in front of you and you're like, we have selected you to go make a difference. And you got people all over the political spectrum, far right, far left, in the middle. And they did that on purpose. They did it on purpose. Right. And I met some of my best friends, and it really just, like, I felt a calling, like, what can you do? Like, how can you use your skill set to really impact more people? And there's a guy in the group who's a very successful entrepreneur. And I was just talking to him about an idea I had. And he's like, well, could you use technology to make this happen? I'm like, yeah, I'm an expert in wearable tech. And he's like, well, then go try and work on this. So I did. And I basically ran a pilot study, and we were able to prove out that you could use different data sets to predict things like how they would feel and their energy level, like multiple days in advance. And he's like, this is a company. And so he gave me some seed capital, and I felt at that time called to go do it. So call it 2021, I went full time. And man, I have learned, when you're in the world of, human performance in college or the NFL, like, you're working so much that it's like, we always called it the profession. It's like the world was like I had tunnel vision in a sense. Mm-hmm. And then I go out and I'm working in tech and business, and it's like, whoa, like, there is so much I did not know, skills I did not have. And I have learned so much about product development and from broader sense, like, how do you create something that people actually love and enjoy and makes an impact in their life? Behavior design processes, how, like, data cleaning, data science, like all of this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, like, it's been the hardest and most rewarding thing I've ever done. It has literally been like, as Elon Musk says, doing a startup is like eating glass. It's not like you go to a job and punch the clock and you go home. Like, your brain never shuts off. And that has been, like, all the things that I talk about, like, I've had to put into practice myself. And it has been the most challenging period of my life, but I feel like it's created a tremendous amount of resilience. I know that I can do incredibly hard things, and I've learned skill sets that I think I've developed some very rare skills.
So, all right. So just based on what you're saying, like, you had this very small worldview compared to maybe how you're thinking now, but did you almost have to, like, unlearn some things? Like, you had to become a different person almost, going from that world of college sports, which is an awesome world too, but transforming into now this tech company. Like,
I had to learn a lot. It was like I was like listening to podcasts, reading books, watching YouTube videos of, like, different tech founders. You start to see patterns of how the best companies build, like principles, heuristics they follow, and rules, How do you get to, I didn't know what product market fit was. Like, how do I achieve product market fit? What does that look like? How do you iterate to that? What are design sprints, design thinking? And so, if I ever went back to sports, I think that I would be able to do a 10x better job, because I view like whatever you deliver to the athletes as a product. You're putting a product on the field, right? You heard that before, right? Well, how do you create a product? You have to have incredibly fast feedback loops to know if it's working or not. So you have assessment, intervention, monitoring tools in place, having clearly defined work sprints. How do you hold people accountable to getting those things done? So all these just different DevOps type of things. Never knew any of this. But the funny thing was, there was other people that were in strength conditioning that were also into computer engineering. And I'm reading these books about agile methods. I'm like, what in the world is this? And now I'm like, oh, I get it. I totally understand now. And the world with data and AI and machine learning, like I've been learning all about this for 3.5 years. And so I have colleagues that are still in. I'm like, guys, you could be using, there's so much I have learned. I'm still feel like very dumb, but I'm more efficient. I can get things done a lot faster. I feel like I'm a better presenter and communicator. The podcast is like daily refinement of how do you communicate with somebody. Getting up and pitching hundreds of times and getting told no over and over and over again, and having to take brutal feedback. You're going to fail because of this. And, or your message wasn't clear. I'm like, of course it's clear. How do you not, no, if they can't, if a fifth grader can't grunt out exactly what you do, you failed. And so I think it's just developed all these different skill sets that an executive should have. So, anyway, I don't know what it's preparing for me to do in the future, but, AIM7 has been just an absolute incredible journey, and we're making an impact, in the world of pickleball right now. We pivoted the company into pickleball because we saw a market opportunity, and, we've been able to make a pretty big dent in that world pretty fast. And, it's just been pretty wild.
That's awesome, man. It's awesome. So what makes an effective communicator then? Because that's something that I want to get better at it. Like I actually, I need to get better at it, quite frankly. And it's opened my eyes the last couple of days, especially. So we're trying to buy a new car right now, trying to buy a used car. We're sitting across the table from the used car salesman and I'm seeing all the tactics he's using, the negotiation tactics. And I'm like, I'm not a very good negotiator. I don't know.
Well, negotiating and communicating are different.
Right. It's a form of communication, for sure. Obviously. So, but maybe, just generally speaking, what
I think one thing is like being able to get, I was helping somebody recently with a presentation they were putting together for a job, and it was just a word salad. And most people, they just put so much stuff on a slide. Here's what happens. People stop listening. They're reading. And by the time you're done talking, they have no idea what was their start. They can't, you got to tell them what you're going to tell them. You got to tell them, and you got to tell them what you told them. And if it's kind of like, what are the 3 things you want them to know before you get started? And then the slide, let's just say you're doing a presentation, because people have to do this for work, whatever. Look at Apple's presentations, Steve Jobs, like 1 word, 3 words, an image. And people are like looking at their notes. Like, he would spend hours and hours and hours going over every single word that he would use to make sure that it connected with the audience. And so when I do a presentation, I spend a ton of time. I probably spent like 30 or 40 hours practicing for a 5-minute pitch. I had to go city to city to do this. And, it's almost like poetry, a lyrical poet. Like you learn inflection, you learn tone, you learn when to pause. I went to a course in New Jersey on how to present it, and it was absolutely amazing. It's a next level presenting. And so I think absolute clarity. And when you deliver a message, it should be so clear that everybody in the room walks out knowing exactly what you were trying to get to. Using story is another thing. People think in stories.
I was really just going to say you're a good storyteller. I was just thinking that.
Well, I mean, it's true. I mean, I appreciate that, but like I heard this from somebody else, and then I went and studied and read the books. Carmine Gallo is a great author. You should read his stuff. There's a great book called Invent and Wander, and it's the shareholder letters of Steve Jobs. Go read his shareholder letters. You want to talk about a lesson in clear communication. And you will understand why the best in the world are so good at what they do. Now, Elon Musk, sometimes he can be hard to understand a little bit. But I know you're talking about communication, but just listen to what I'm about to say. What Elon is better at than anybody in the world is he is so good at getting to the root of the problem. And it's the reason he can run Neuralink and Tesla and X and SpaceX is because what he'll do is he'll go in and be like, find the biggest problem, and then he will literally get in hands dirty, whether it's coding, he'll work with the people to solve the biggest problem, and then whatever that lever is, turn that lever. What is it that's going to change the outcome? Let's all figure it out. And he also doesn't hamstring people. I have a friend now that's working at Tesla on a specific project. He's like, it's amazing. They don't tell us what software to use. They're just like, here's the task. Go figure it out. We hired you because you're really, really, really good. Go figure it out. And that's another thing that I've learned is like, if you can, talent will determine your organization. A players hire A players. The second you hire a B player into your organization, you dilute the entire place. You cannot overpay for talent, meaning like one great employee can make an entire company. In software engineering, one great engineer can make or break your entire company. And so I think it's really important wherever you're working. Like, look, if it's a school district, like there's people that want to be teachers, right? Like go hire the best incoming teachers possible and try not to settle. If you're doing really difficult tasks, you want people that are committed to the mission, that are incredibly skilled at what they do, and are incredibly hard workers. They bring everything up and they hold each other accountable. I just found like in the past 3.5 years doing this startup thing, it's very clear when people are a match and when they're not a match. And it starts with, developing core values and then evaluating people off of those values. So if you say that accountability is one of our values, an accountable person shows up on time, finishes their tasks on time. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, these are the things like I was so caught up as a coach, like trying to do, like learn the fundamentals of training an athlete, sprint development, all that kind of stuff. That stuff's great. You have to do all of that. But then it's like, how does it all come together to equal a program that an athlete can execute? How is it coached? How is it translated? How does the organization around that athlete supporting that athlete? That brings everything to life. And so, I don't know, I've kind of had this like full 360 from coaching to, I'm still coaching now. It's just, it looks different. Working in tech, it's just stretched me in so many different ways. And then having an opportunity to do this show, I'm always learning new things and learning about new skills that I need to develop.
It's awesome, man. It really is. Cause you just seem like such a curious and super present. Like my internet just kicked out for a second and then you just hop back on and just continue with your thought. And that's really interesting too, because it seems like you're saying that the ability to evaluate talent is not just evaluate talent, but like be in tune with, and say you hired the wrong person, be in tune with the fact that, hey, this isn't going to work out. Like we need to part ways or something along. Maybe not describing that right, but
no, you are. Like as soon as you have the thought in your head that somebody's not a match, it's time for them to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, this was awesome. I just appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Feel like there's a million other things I would love to ask you, but just want to respect your time here. Where can folks find you? Like the app is really cool. I've checked it out a little bit. I'm not a member yet or anything, but I looked it up.
It's free. You can hop on. If you play pickleball, you can hop on for free. It's got all sorts of cool stuff, warm-ups and cool downs and data tracking and all that kind of stuff. So that's aim7.com. It's in the app store. There's a free tier of that app. If you're interested in the podcast, it's the Blueprint. Maybe you could put that in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a weekly newsletter called Adaptation that I send out roughly every Friday. And it's just my thoughts on how to be a more adaptable human being. I'm also on social media at Erik Korem on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram.
Perfect. All right. Well, this is awesome. Looking forward to stay in touch, Erik. And just thanks again for the time. It was great.
You got it.
All right.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. You got it.